Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Wednesday, October 30th, 2024. All right, first thing, another reminder about our fundraiser at antiwar.com. We're trying to close out this week. Well, we're trying to finish by the election next Tuesday. Not sure if we'll meet that deadline, but we did just have some nice donations roll in. So please help us if you could go to antiwar.com/donate and see the different ways that you can support us. This is how we get by. We are 100% funded by our readers. All right, so the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, 115 Palestinians killed by Israeli strikes on Gaza. So at least 115 Palestinians were killed by Israeli strikes in the Gaza Strip on Tuesday, medical sources told the Palestinian news agency Wafa, and the vast majority being killed by an attack on an apartment building in Beit Lahia, northern Gaza. The medical sources said at least 109 Palestinians, including many women and children, were killed by strikes on the building in Beit Lahia. So 115 killed, at least 109 killed in this one attack on this apartment building in northern Gaza. Earlier reports put the death toll at 93, including 25 children. So this 5-story building was owned by the Abu Nasser family, who recently took in many displaced Palestinians. According to Middle East Eye, at the time of the strike, it was estimated that 300 to 400 people were sleeping in the building. Many of the people wounded in the strike were dying due to the lack of medical resources in the area, which has been under total siege since early October, as Israel is attempting to carry out an ethnic cleansing plan in northern Gaza. The nearby Kamal Adwan hospital was recently attacked by Israeli forces and is unable to treat the wounded. This picture that we have here, one of the saddest pictures I've seen in a while. This is actually in Deir al-Balah in central Gaza. But it's a boy, a Palestinian boy, carrying a dead child. I mean, it's just, it's very sad. And it goes to show, again, every day you see children being killed and wounded by these Israeli strikes. So Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, he's the director of the Kamal Adwan Hospital, who we've been talking about him lately with the attack on the hospital. And he's talking about the wounded in these Israeli attacks in Beit Lahia. He said, quote, "We cannot treat those wounded in the Beit Lahia massacre due to the lack of resources. Most of those injured may die due to lack of resources. The world must act and not just watch the genocide in Gaza," end quote. So this massacre was bad enough for the U.S. to say that it was concerned about the attack, but there's no sign that it will impact U.S. military aid for Israel. State Department spokesman Matt Miller said, quote, "We are deeply concerned by the loss of civilian life in this incident. This was a horrifying incident with a horrifying result," end quote. He acknowledged that there were reports of about 24 children being killed. But as usual, Miller said that the U.S. would ask Israel about it. Didn't say there would be any kind of accountability or anything like that. He said, quote, "We have reached out to the government of Israel to ask what happened here," end quote. And this wouldn't be possible without U.S. military aid, without U.S. support. Israeli strikes were also reported in Gaza City and near the southern city of Rafah. Gaza's health ministry said in its daily update that 41 Palestinians were killed in the previous 24-hour period. So their recorded death toll is at 43,061. So obviously that number doesn't include all the people killed in Beit Lahia. That number from the Palestinian medical sources could include people who are dead still under the rubble. The health ministry only counts bodies that come into hospitals and morgues. And the ministry said, quote, "A number of victims are still under the rubble and on the roads, and ambulance and civil defense crews cannot reach them," end quote. And of course, whenever we talk about the death toll, this is an undercount, considered an undercount. The health ministry's numbers, it doesn't include the people who have died, who are under the rubble, or indirect deaths. We had that group of American healthcare workers estimate that over 118,000 people have been killed by Israel's war and siege And they say that that's a minimum. So, I mean, it's just absolutely horrific what the U.S. is enabling. And this next story, you see just how much the U.S. is funding this thing. The U.S. is funding 70% of Israel's wars. This article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. A new report by the Israeli outlet Calculist, which is an online Israeli news site, focuses on financial stuff. They reviewed Israeli military spending on wars since October 7th, finding that Washington is funding 70% of Israel's military costs. In a little over a year, the U.S. has provided Israel with more than $20 billion in military aid. So this report said, quote, the scope of American aid since the beginning of the war is about 85 billion shekels. According to official estimates by the Bank of Israel, the total cost of the war is approximately 118 billion, and that's shekels. Therefore, according to a simple calculation, the Americans financed about 70% of the war effort, end quote. And they're basing this on the Cost of War project, that the U.S. has spent $22.57 billion in military aid to Israel. That also includes a few billion that the U.S. has spent on its own military operations in the region, but that has been in support of Israel. That's the deployments, that's the, this new war against the Houthis, which was launched in defense of Israeli shipping. So this is from the Calculist article, and this is really something here. It says, quote, there is no doubt that without the American aid, the government deficit for the years 2024 to 2025 would have increased by about 4.3% GDP, which would have made it unfinanceable. Therefore, it is doubtful whether this war would have been conducted as it is, neither in intensity nor its scope, without the American assistance, end quote. And we know that Israel would not be able to do what they're doing in Gaza without U.S. Steady flow of U.S. weapons and other military aid. And this just goes to show why, if you're an American, I mean, this isn't just some faraway conflict that your government's not involved in. This is something that, if not for the U.S. government that you pay taxes to, this wouldn't be happening at this scale, at least. And then Kyle gets into some of the stuff about the death toll that I just mentioned, just the absolute atrocities, the complete horror show, the genocide that the U.S. is funding and enabling and supporting in Gaza. All right, so the next one here, Israel kills 10 civilians in Lebanese coastal town. This article is from Jason Ditz. Israeli airstrikes continued against the southern coast of Lebanon today, and this was on Tuesday, hitting the small coastal town of Sarafand. The town's mayor reported that at least 10 civilians had been killed, nearly all women and children. The Lebanese health ministry reported a lower death toll earlier in the day, but added that rescue operations were still underway. The ministry also said that at least 21 other civilians were wounded in the attack. Israel did not comment on the attack on Sarafand. The IDF has a general policy of not commenting on Israeli strikes, first reported in the foreign media, which includes virtually all Israeli strikes against civilian targets. Israeli attacks are taking place throughout Lebanon and have killed thousands. Israel has also issued mass evacuation orders affecting many of the highly populated areas in the country. Over 1 million people have been displaced. So then later on Tuesday, Israel carried up a follow-up attack in the same area, hitting the town of Haret Saida, killing at least 5 civilians. 33 were also wounded in the attack. As the health ministry advises, these are preliminary numbers that are likely to climb. So lots of civilians still being killed in Lebanon. The next one here, Hezbollah appoints its former deputy as new leader. So Hezbollah announced on Tuesday that it appointed Sheikh Naim Qassem as the successor to Hassan Nasrallah, the group's late leader, who was killed by Israeli airstrikes on September 27th. According to the Cradle, Qassem became involved with Hezbollah when the group was first formed in the 1980s and has been Hezbollah's deputy secretary general since 1991. Hezbollah put out a statement saying that he was the man in charge now. And Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant threatened Qassem's life after the news of his appointment. He wrote on X, quote, "Temporary appointment, not for long," end quote. And he posted that with a picture of Qasem. So this appointment comes amid Israeli media reports that suggest Israel might be looking for a ceasefire deal in Lebanon. Haaretz reported that the Israeli military establishment supports advancing ceasefire negotiations, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was expected to convene a meeting on the issue on Tuesday. The Haaretz report said that Israel's military campaign in Lebanon is expected to wind down soon. However, the report also said one of Israel's demands for a ceasefire would be for the Israeli military to have operational freedom in southern Lebanon to enforce a truce deal, which is a non-starter for Hezbollah and likely the Lebanese government as well. They want to be able to say, oh, if Hezbollah is violating the deal, we can go in there. And that, I don't think anybody's going to go for that on the Lebanese side. So while Israeli airstrikes have decimated Hezbollah's leadership and killed thousands of Lebanese, including many civilians, Israeli troops on the ground fighting in South Lebanon have faced pretty stiff resistance still. In about 3 weeks, at least 32 Israeli troops have been killed in combat on the ground fighting against Hezbollah. They're still able to put up a fight against the invading Israeli soldiers. All right, so the next one here, Israel kills at least 67 in attacks across East Lebanon. So this is, I went over this yesterday. These were the strikes in the Bekaa Valley in eastern Lebanon, very heavy airstrikes. This article's from Jason Ditz. He just updated the death toll. At the time, yesterday, it was at least 60. Now the number is at least 67 have been slain in these strikes against multiple cities and towns in this area. And this was throughout Monday that Israel really bombed this area very heavily. All right, the next one here. Report says the U.S. envoy is promoting an internal uprising in Lebanon. So this article is from The Cradle, and it's based on a report from Al Akhbar, which is a Lebanese newspaper. And I mean, if this is true, this is really something. It's also not a surprise. So a high-ranking Lebanese security source revealed to Al Akhbar newspaper that the U.S. ambassador to Lebanon, Lisa Johnson, is continuing her agenda to prepare Lebanon for a post-Hezbollah era by mobilizing internal forces against the Islamic resistance movement while it fights the Israeli army. In discussions with Lebanese politicians, Johnson reportedly said, quote, "Israel cannot achieve everything through war. It's time for you to do your part and launch an internal uprising under the banner of enough. The Lebanese people must show their desire to rise up and get rid of Hezbollah and return to the context that emerged after the assassination of Rafik Hariri, especially since the regional, international, and field circumstances are in your favor," end quote. So this, the reason why I think this is believable is that we've seen publicly the State Department say, basically, the U.S. say, that they support Israel's war in Lebanon and that they want to remove Hezbollah as a political entity, basically. I mean, the State Department said just that. Matt Miller said that. So this isn't, even though it just seems so brazen for a diplomat to say this, this is an American ambassador we're talking about. This is kind of their style, to be this confrontational with their host countries. Apparently, she also said, quote, "Why do you seem afraid? Hezbollah has been defeated, its leadership is destroyed, and we are with you, and the entire free world stands by your side," end quote. And apparently, the U.S. has someone in mind to be the president of Lebanon. Johnson encouraged her Lebanese allies to advocate for the election of Lebanese Armed Forces Commander General Joseph Aoun as president of Lebanon, saying, quote, "He will appoint a strong commander for the Lebanese army, and we will support the army in restraining all Hezbollah supporters. You will have backing from Arab states and the West, but the time to act is now," end quote. I mean, this sounds like the U.S. inciting another civil war in Lebanon. And you know how brutal the Lebanese civil war was. I mean, again, this is based on a report in a Lebanese newspaper. I think it's very believable that a U.S. ambassador would say something like this. All right, so the next one here, Russia launches new nuclear drills. So Russian President Vladimir Putin announced on Tuesday that Russia was conducting nuclear deterrence drills that involved the firing of missiles from the air, land, and sea. Putin said, quote, "Today we are conducting a regular training exercises for our strategic deterrence forces. This exercise will involve practicing the procedures for officials in managing the use of nuclear weapons, including practical launches of ballistic and cruise missiles, end quote. So Russia's defense minister said that the drills simulated the, quote, strategic offensive forces launching a massive nuclear strike in response to a nuclear strike by the enemy, end quote. So Putin said that it was important for Russia's strategic forces to be in a state of constant combat readiness in light of escalating geopolitical tensions. And these Russian drills came a few days after NATO concluded its annual nuclear drills known as Steadfast Noon. The exercises were conducted over Belgium and the Netherlands and in airspace over Denmark, the UK, and the North Sea. They said that the training involved 13 allied countries, approximately 2,000 military personnel, and a variety of more than 60 aircraft, including nuclear-capable jets, bombers, and fighter escorts. So major NATO nuclear drills just took place. They concluded on October 24th. And, of course, both of these drills come amid just soaring tensions. Things are really bad. I haven't been covering, the situation in Ukraine enough, I don't think. One thing that happened recently was Putin ordered changes to Russia's nuclear doctrine to lower the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons, directly in response to threats from the West that they would support long-range strikes inside Ukraine using, U.S. and British missiles. So far, it looks like the U.S. has backed down on that. They got the message from Putin, but, we've also seen them back down on other things and then go ahead with those escalations. All right, so the next one here, the Kremlin says that German arms factory in Ukraine is a legitimate target. So the Kremlin said on Tuesday that a factory in Ukraine that was opened by the Germans' arms maker Rheinmetall could be a target of the Russian military. When asked if Russia considered the factory a legitimate military target, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that it certainly is a military target. So Rheinmetall opened the factory this month, and it will focus on the production and maintenance of armored vehicles. Armin Popperger, the CEO of Rheinmetall, said the goal is to produce a batch of Lynx infantry fighting vehicles by the end of the year. Rheinmetall has said it plans to open a total of 4 factories in Ukraine, despite Russian threats to target them. The other 3 factories will include facilities to produce gunpowder, tank ammunition, and air defense systems. Other Western arm makers looking to cash in on the proxy war have announced plans to open factories or help facilitate the production of weapons inside Ukraine. Helping build up Ukraine's military-industrial complex is one of NATO's long-term goals. The U.S. is also spending money to help produce weapons inside Ukraine. Last week, Zelensky said that the U.S. has agreed to provide $800 million for the production of long-range drones, which can be used to hit targets deep inside Russian territory. So that's kind of a new form of support that the U.S. is giving Ukraine, funding production of weapons in Ukraine. And these are weapons that can hit targets very deep inside Russia. So it is U.S. support for these long-range Ukrainian strikes inside Russian territory. It seems like they're trying to work around the missiles and just go directly to supporting the drone production. All right, so the next one here, Iran says it will exercise its right of self-defense. So amid speculation over whether Iran will respond to Israel's recent airstrikes on Iranian territory, a spokeswoman for the Iranian government said Tuesday that Iran has a legitimate right to self-defense and warned it will exercise that right at the appropriate time and place. So a day earlier, Ali Akbar Velati, an advisor to Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, downplayed the Israeli attack on Iran, saying that it was much ado about nothing. He said Israel was trying to start a regional war, saying Israel has, quote, the potential to set the volatile Middle East region on fire and to create the spark that would set the regional powder keg alight, end quote. So the Israeli strikes on Iran were launched early Saturday morning, and they killed 4 Iranian soldiers and also 1 civilian. I don't think I mentioned that on the show, but after, it was first reported 4 soldiers were killed, and then they said a civilian was killed as well. So a total of 5 Iranians were killed. Iran has downplayed the damage done to its air defenses, saying that everything has already been repaired, but while Western media reports say that some air defense systems were completely destroyed. Iranian government spokeswoman Fatima Irani said the Israeli attack was an attempt to distract from Israel's failures in Gaza and Lebanon. She said, quote, "The Zionist regime is gravely mistaken in thinking it can disrupt the unity of the Iranian people with such actions. It fails to realize that such actions only strengthen our national solidarity," end quote. She also announced that Iran would be increasing its military budget by 200% to build up its defenses. So that's a pretty huge increase in military spending. And according to SIPRI, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, Iran spent $10.3 billion on its military in 2023. So if they increase it by 200%, that would put it at around $30 billion. And the new budget is expected to be finalized by Iran's parliament in March 2025. So Moharani made clear the plans to significantly increase the military budget was a response to Israeli aggression in the region. So, we are seeing comments from the Iranian government saying that they're going to respond, but based on what I've seen, I don't expect any kind of big Iranian ballistic missile attack. I think they might sit back for a while. But I think Israel, they're just on such a tear that they might target some more Iranians in Syria or something like that, and then that could provoke another big Iranian attack. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. All right, so the next one here, Taiwan signs deal with the U.S. to buy 1,000 attack drones. So Taiwan's defense ministry has signed an agreement with the U.S. to purchase 1,000 attack drones from two American companies, AeroVironment and Anduril Industries, and this was reported by Bloomberg on Monday. The report said Taiwan signed a letter of offer and acceptance in September, and that's a step that comes before contracts are signed and they agree on the number of drones and the cost, and those are expected to be signed soon, the contracts. So back in June, there was a similar sale. The State Department approved a deal worth $360 million for about 1,000 attack drones produced by these two companies. The sale included 291 Altius 600M systems, which are produced by Anduril, and 720 Switchblade drones produced by AeroVironment. China responded to the sale by issuing sanctions on some of the weapons makers and executives involved. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Lin Zhan was pointed out these sanctions on Tuesday when he was asked about the new potential sale. So he was asked about this. There's a report that Taiwan's defense ministry signed this, and he said in response, quote, "Taiwan is a province of China, and there is no such thing as Taiwan's Ministry of Defense. China's firm opposition to the military contact between the U.S. and Taiwan is consistent and clear. The two U.S. companies you mentioned and relevant senior executives in charge are under sanctions by China," end quote. So both of these drones, these types of drones are kamikaze drones, which means they crash into their target and explode. They carry small warheads, and these types of drones have been used extensively in Ukraine. Ukraine produces a lot of their own, and that's what they launch all these strikes with. And I bet the ones that they produce, the thing about these small drones is that they're really cheap. I mean, these ones don't sound too cheap, $360 million for about 1,000, but I think they could probably be made for much less money, or a different version, something similar. So, I don't know if you guys have seen these videos. You see these videos once in a while of a Ukrainian or Russian soldier kind of being stalked by a drone, and they're trying to run away and avoid it. And I've seen somewhere it ends with the person being killed. I saw one recently where in a last ditch effort, the guy threw his rifle at the drone and that exploded it far enough away from him that it didn't kill him. So really kind of dystopian stuff, these little drones. And we're seeing them used a lot in Russia and Ukraine. But the U.S. has really big plans for these little drones when it comes to preparing for war with China. And this is something that just terrifies me. Admiral Samuel Paporo, the head of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, he said earlier this year that the U.S. is planning to create a hellscape. That's what he called it, a hellscape of aerial drones, drone boats, and unmanned submarines in the Taiwan Strait if China attacks Taiwan. He said, quote, I want to turn the Taiwan Strait into an unmanned hellscape using a number of classified capabilities so that I can make their lives utterly miserable for a month, which buys me the time for the rest of everything, end quote. So basically saying when China first attacks, unleash this hellscape of drones. And in the meantime, the U.S. is going to start sending more forces to the region for a more conventional naval battle, I guess. But, I mean, man, and this, I think, is probably part of the thinking of selling Taiwan these types of drones. You know, they're talking about sending thousands in the sky. I mean, it's just absolutely dystopian stuff here. And these are active plans. Last year, Kathleen Hicks, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, she might have recently resigned or retired or something. I might have her confused with somebody. But anyway, this was last year that she outlined a plan to deploy thousands of drones controlled by artificial intelligence, known as the Replicator Initiative. And this is what she said, quote, "With Replicator, we're beginning with all domain attributable autonomy, or ADA2, to help us overcome China's advantage in mass. More ships, more missiles, more forces," end quote. She added that the U.S. plans to deploy the drones, quote, "at a scale of multiple thousands in multiple domains within the next 18 to 24 months. And so this is something, that was September 2023, so more than a year ago. So this is something within the next year we might see, I don't know, the U.S. deploying these small drones. Maybe we won't even really be aware of it, that they're sending all this stuff over there. And the U.S., as I talk about, this is another thing I really need to cover more, is these escalations in the Asia Pacific. The U.S. is openly preparing for a future war with China. Direct war. They're talking about a direct war with China despite the risk of nuclear war. And the U.S. Navy just recently unveiled a plan to be prepared for war by 2027. And the U.S. is just completely ignoring any of China's concerns. They're constantly calling Taiwan a red line. U.S. just continues to increase support, both military and diplomatic, for Taiwan. So that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Bruce Fine: Does foreign interventionism make America safer? One from Dan McKnight: The specter of Defense Secretary Cheney. One is an open letter from 2,000 Israelis, call for global pressure on Israel to force an immediate ceasefire. One from Judge Napolitano: War and the Constitution. And one from Kelly Vlahos: War and the Cost of Groceries. So please go check all of that out. Lots of stuff in the lower section. We have that really sad picture of the boy as our picture story. Go check out our blog. Kyle's show, Conflicts of Interest, is in there. Just lots and lots of content at antiwar.com, even if you watch or listen to this show. Again, help us with our fundraiser if you can, antiwar.com/donate. Like and subscribe, comment, share the show. Tell your friends about antiwar.com. Follow us on social media, Twitter, Instagram. The posts over there are looking really great. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.